All right. Hello again. Today, I wanted to take some time to talk about Liverpool. Kind of similarly how I talked about, you know, Real Madrid and Barcelona. Like just giving my thoughts for the upcoming season, as I would say, like Liverpool are one of the most, you know, exciting sides, looking like one of the sides that people are looking forward to a lot this season, just because of the signings they made and the success they had last year, and um, them really like pushing going into like this new like slot era of Liverpool after many years. I think it was like 7, 8, 9 years of Jurgen Klopp. So first, I just want to start by going over their last season setup. So mainly with Klopp, Liverpool would set up in a 4-3-3. And here I can quickly just visualize that for you guys. So it was mainly like this, with an aggressive 4-3-3 press, where the center backs are being pressed highly, and then the center forward would usually drop. This would usually be Firmino, and he would drop into the midfield to create a midfield overload and basically block off the pivots of the opposition. And so these guys would press relentlessly, kind of into out or out to in. Sorry. So if Salah's in this position and the fullback's over here, he would kind of press like that onto the center back who would be over here to cut off this angle. And then obviously with the two center mids over here, McAllister and then Luis Diaz. Obviously, these are just placeholders. Klopp had different players, but mainly I think it was like Firmino and Henderson, I guess you could say, Wijnaldum as well, who's a great runner for the team. They would cut off the pivot passes. And I think the best game, if you want to really see Jurgen Klopp's tactics, are the City games, especially the 2-2 that they had. I believe it was at the Etihad. I'm sorry, I don't forget. I don't remember the year. And also another really good game to look at if you want to watch how Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool played is again, it was a City game, but it was where John Stones had that like crazy goal line clearance. So I think those two games are really good games to watch if you're want to look into how Jurgen Klopp set up this Liverpool side. So, but with Slot, one thing, he's a manager that has a lot of the same ideologies as Klopp. And I think Liverpool's board did really well appointing Slot, and I think Klopp did a good job, selecting Slot as his successor, as it wasn't necessarily like an evolution, It was it wasn't more of like a restructuring, like a rebuild. It was more of an evolution of the side. So one main tweak that Liverpool made is instead of setting up in that 4-3-3, they set up in this 4-2-3-1 setup. And this was the most used 11 that Liverpool had. And basically it just gave more, structure to this midfield line with the two pivots dropping in. And then I think the player that benefited a lot from this is Gravenberch, moving from like before he was known as like either like a more advanced 8 or like a box to box. He was now like a single pivot in here with, it was usually McAllister here, and then kind of set up like this with Gravenberch as like a single pivot, and then Trent would be like here. Gravenberch is not when I say single pivot, his skill set, when you think about it, he's not like a really high volume passer. He's not a really accurate, long ball player. He doesn't have the natural I guess technical abilities that you would associate with a tempo setter. But what he is really good at is beating his man and kind of breaking a line on the half turn and driving with the ball. He's really good with the ball at his feet. And what he would do in this situation is just, say the opposition is pressing him and he's a single pivot over here receiving from the back line. Say Van Dijk, Konate are dropped here and he receives from the back line. If somebody presses onto him like this, he can easily turn and drive with the ball and then play it into McAllister, into Szoboszlai. And basically what Slot wanted to do here with that is kind of increase the numbers in this area of the pitch, which is like in between the defensive and midfield line of the opposition. So instead of having one floating 10 in there with McAllister, you have two now with Szoboszlai. Or usually it would be Szoboszlai, but McAllister could drop in here, help a build up, and then he would float higher up. So then when Gravenberch turned, you have two options in the middle now, to receive and break an opposition line. Luis Diaz would drop, I would say, more in these areas, and McAllister would be here. So he would drop in, playing more of like a false nine off of the left-hand side, which Luis Diaz did well at. But we'll kind of go into that with the new signings and how Ekitike is just so good in this role. And then Salah would be like up, touching the width, touching or holding the touch line and taking on his man. And then what I think benefited Salah a lot over here is, because of that isolation, because of the buildup happening over here, Liverpool could commit so many men to the box. You have four bodies in the box, and Salah over here. We know Salah is a very direct winger, an output machine. So not only did his goal scoring obviously benefit from this, because he was in isolations a lot because of how many players Liverpool committed to this left kind of half space and central zone of the pitch. But then he also had a lot of bodies to attack and play passes into to rack up his assist numbers. And we saw that he had the most goals and most assists in the Premier League last season. Another thing that I wanted to mention with the build-up is the tactical flexibility on the ball. We saw a lot of rotations with this side, and they were rotations that were intentional, I guess is the best word to use. So say they're again building up over here. McAllister has to drop deep to help with build-up, and maybe Salah would come inside. When Salah would come inside, you would see Trent assume those normal wing back kind of overlapping runs role, and then Szoboszlai would be more up here with Luis Diaz coming here, and then Gakpo holding the touchline. So now you have sort of an overload on this right-hand side that allowed Liverpool to build up, and then Gakpo would be the outlet over here. When McAllister pushed up, you would have Luis Diaz and Gakpo over here that are really good. Both players are super good at cutting in and striking. They would lose that box presence, but then you have, I guess you have a really good runner in Szoboszlai. I think his engine is his best trait. He runs for the team really well, and when he's over here in this space, not only would it allow Salah and Trent to have those rotations where Salah would come out wide, but Salah could also then come inside and help facilitate the play from here. And then a final thing I wanted to kind of talk about with this build-up is Trent's role in this. He assumed less of that aggressive, or I'll talk about both fullbacks in this case. He assumed less of that aggressive, fullback, overlapping runs, like Robertson as well, less of the overlapping runs. And Robertson kind of became, a reserved, it was like a staggered three-back in, what's it called? In possession, favored towards this left-hand side. And if Salah was out here hugging the touchline and Luis Diaz was coming in the middle, you would see Trent in these spaces. And because Liverpool had so many players in the middle, and now you have Gakpo that's out wide over here, Robertson a bit higher. Robertson is playing those balls from this position, a bit deeper, more reserved. You have Konate and Van Dijk. And then you have Trent over here, with that his best trait is obviously passing, and he's really good at finding those long balls. So you'd see a lot of him playing balls into Gakpo, playing those through balls into Salah, maybe playing off of Szoboszlai in the middle. And what this helped is create a midfield, create a midfield kind of overload, or a midfield box almost, with Szoboszlai and McAllister as two floating 10s between the lines, and then Gravenberch and Trent operating as that double pivot. But then also Trent, you would find him in this position a lot as well. And then Luis Diaz dropping in, you create a five-man midfield overload, and you can build up through the center so well with this sort of setup. And then now, last thing with the press. So we know that Klopp pressed in a 4-3-3. What Slot did is he pressed in a aggressive 4-2-4. So instead of creating that midfield overload out of possession to block off the pivots, Slot would go man-to-man on the entire back line. And what this allowed Liverpool to do is suffocate the opposition in their own half. And one thing I wanted to mention with this press is When you look at Klopp's Liverpool, they were possessionally dominant because of their aggressive nature off the ball. But when they played bigger sides, like when you play City and all that, you saw that Liverpool did not have that uptick in possession because they weren't necessarily possession oriented. They were really good on the ball because they knew how to win it back really quickly. What Slot wanted to change though is make them slightly more possession oriented. So that's the reason for that midfield overload, that central overload, the box in the midfield, the rotations, Robertson's more reserved role. They're still aggressive in the press, in which I'll like kind of demonstrate over here, and then also go into the shortcomings. But lost my train of thought. They're still aggressive in the press, but they're also more like possession. I would say possession and pressing were like two main things, for this Liverpool side. Slot wanted to push possession a little bit higher than pressing, whereas pressing was like the main thing for Klopp. If that makes sense, let me know. So with this 4-2-4 press, you go man to man on the back line, and you just because you're going man to man on the back line and pushing a midfielder up. Yes, you're a man light in midfield, but you're cutting off passes directly at the first stage of buildup. However, a shortcoming of this press is if the back line was kind of passive and not pressing as a unit, and we saw this against PSG. I think the biggest example, if you want to see what I'm talking about, go watch that PSG game back, the second leg at Anfield, and look at the first goal and where Dembele is. So what Luis Enrique figured out is you're going man-to-man in this backline press. He would drop Vitinha in and push Hakimi high. So you have Gakpo that's kind of in this conundrum where like, okay, do I follow Hakimi and leave this space over here? And then obviously the wingers over here as well and risk a 2-on-1 on Robertson? Or do I stick in my position and cover the space over here? But then that leaves Hakimi free over here for a chipped ball over to him that Donnarumma could play. Well, they tried that. Donnarumma tried that to Nuno Mendes a lot of times. He wasn't good on the ball, and that's the reason why PSG, switched goalkeepers now. Luis Enrique one's a better ball playing goalkeeper, but that's besides the point. But then say like Marquinhos or Pacho could play that chipped ball into space. So what Enrique did is he dropped Vitinha in this area in between these two. And so now you have this overload over here. You push these guys a bit central. And then for the goal, I'll actually use the goal as a straight example. You push Luis Diaz in, so Boslai would then press on Vitinha, and these midfielders, they would not want to come press in. Now you're 2-on-2 in the midfield, so they're thinking like, okay, we're fine, But Vitinha pushing up, and those two center mids, João Neves and Fabinho Ruiz would also push up, and then basically they would be in this position. What do you see over here? That's the issue that's growing. This space right here. You're breaking two lines of defense, and now with Vitinha, say it's Marquinhos, it's Pacho on Szoboszlai, and then Vitinha or Marquinhos is on Luis Diaz, Vitinha is on Szoboszlai, and then Pacho on Salah. Salah pushing immediately when Salah pushed in, Dembele would drop into the space. Nuno Mendes would be the free man. Say they even get to him, he would just fizz a ball into here, and it doesn't even need to be accurate because this space is so big that you can just play it into the area and Dembele would pick it up and then they can just kickstart a counter because you've broken two lines of the press. You've broken two lines of build-up, the defensive line and the midfield line. The initial, or in this case, in Liverpool, because you broke the offensive press and the midfield pressing lines. And now you're in this massive space and you can create. You have Kavicha pushing up. Barcola started that game. So Barcola, combining. And then that resulted in the goal. But in most cases, obviously PSG is a great side. They broke the press and all that. But Liverpool was still in the game. This press is really stifling in that case. Thinking about that. Because when you're playing sides that aren't as, gifted as PSG are, you're suffocating them, and especially when the team presses as a unit. I want to emphasize how important that is pressing as a unit. All sides in Europe, when you press, you have to press as a unit. When they pressed as a unit, it was a Liverpool side that suffocated their opposition, and that's how they were so dominant on the ball. Not with the midfield overload. You're going aggressively man to man on the defensive line, but And one more thing I wanted to highlight with this Liverpool side is they were really well known under Slot for being so good against the counter attack. Now I want to go back to that setup of the two floating tens over here, and then you have Gravenberch as a single pivot. Say Salah, is hugging the touchline. Gakpo is hugging the touchline, and you have this sort of setup. What Liverpool were so good at is you can commit all these men into the box. You can even have Gravenberch maybe staggered with Trent further back. This rest defense was really good, and I think I highlighted in a different video why a rest defense is so important for any high level side. Is Liverpool over here were well covered, and so when they were facing teams against a transition that couldn't break or that broke or say they lost the ball up here, they have such a good they have good numbers back to help them cover. So that's I think I went on for a decent amount of time on old Liverpool, but now we'll get into new Liverpool. So obviously it's still difficult to really say how they will perform. It's a lot of new signings, and you have to give them time. You have to give these top sides time. I think that's one thing that we've kind of lost in the sport. It's like people want results now, and I understand that with how successful certain sides have been with quick turnarounds. Barcelona being last season, I'm sure no Barcelona fan really had those lofty expectations when Flick came in. It's like, now I wouldn't say they were in a rebuild, but you're more on that side of the of where your squad is set. You're more tilting a little bit on the rebuild side more than like, okay, UCL push. And then when Barca started playing, you start seeing like, okay, yeah, these guys are about it. But I think giving this Liverpool side will be giving this Liverpool side time will be important. So this is how they're gonna set up, I think. Again, you're gonna have that single pivot, not much changes, but what's so important here is Wirtz. I think Wirtz being a creator in here, and I think Szoboszlai is like, I'm not the biggest fan of him, I'm not gonna lie, but he's a great runner for the team. That's undeniable. Wirtz, let's go into like player profiles now of Wirtz. So Wirtz is not he's not like a KDB type of midfielder where like he'll win you a game, but what he is an elite connector of play. He's more similar to like a Pedri and an Iniesta than I would say he is to a KDB and like Jude Bellingham. Don't take those comparisons with a grain of salt. I'm just going off of like when you watch the game. When KDB has the ball at his feet, he can change the game. He's a goal scorer. He's like a threat on the ball. Obviously Wirtz is too, but in a different way. He's more of that connector. He's gonna want he's a player that benefits from having a lot of touches on the ball. KDB doesn't need that many touches to influence a game. So Wirtz, I think, is gonna come in over here and similarly to Luis Diaz, when you think about his role dropping into these left half spaces. If you watch Ekitike at Frankfurt, I believe, he was so good in these spaces. Look at his goal even in the Community Shield. It came from him dropping and combining with Wirtz both in this left pocket and then creating a goal. I think Liverpool's left-hand side is going to be so good next season. Szoboszlai would even push in to help support that. And then Gravenberch, who didn't play, I think he'll be a solid single pivot. But I think it'll limit a little bit of the roles of McAllister. He won't be free to roam. Or maybe you'll see rotations like this. And then Szoboszlai, why I really want Szoboszlai to be replaced is I'm thinking about the switch that you have over here to Salah, who's now isolated, and Frimpong. You don't want Frimpong to come inside. He's most well utilized in this position. And when Salah comes in over here, you want somebody to more accurately play those switch balls. If you think of Kroos to like Carvajal, that's like a type of player that I would like over here. Just a good long passer instead of Szoboszlai. But in his own right, I think Slot will figure it out. So this is how Liverpool will probably set up, in possession, with Kerkez maybe a bit more higher, maybe a bit more, attacking oriented. When you push both fullbacks high like this, you just you're so... One, I think Liverpool's left-hand side is going to be so deadly next season. But two, you obviously see like the shortcomings. And I think with the Crystal Palace game in the Community Shield, we saw that defensive structure needs help because now Slot's abandoned. Slot's a pretty he's a more passive manager than Jurgen Klopp is. That's another change, and that's why they were so good against transitions and so good with their rest defense. But now Slot's gonna have to figure that out. What they tried to do is drop a midfielder into the defensive line to help build up, but that left such a big gap in the middle of the pitch for Palace to exploit. And then when the midfielder would push back up, you have such a big gap in between the center backs and then in these spaces. So that's something Slot's going to have to figure out. I'm sure he will because you have the players. Maybe it involves Kirkes playing a more reserved role. I don't know. But I think you have two fullbacks, one elite crosser of the ball and one guy that's like essentially a winger. He's so good. He's probably the best overlapping fullback in the world. So you want to maximize their strengths. And then Wirtz, obviously, he's going to help connect this play, come inside more. And then when he comes inside more, you need somebody to hold the width. So obviously Kirkes has to push up. So there's a lot of things, a lot of I think what Slot's one thing that I mentioned with talking about Slot's game in the previous year is he's so tactically flexible. And I think those signings are going to help him be even more tactically flexible. And I think in transition, Liverpool are going to be a really, really good team. It's just they need to figure out their rest defense because right now it's being kind of exposed with how their fullbacks play now. With Trent, you had more of like a midfielder fullback hybrid, so somebody that could, he's not going to be up here in this position that much anymore. He's comfortable in this position, creating from here. And when he's over here, just think of distance. It's easier to come back here, and help cover. But Frimpong will want to be up here. When Gravenberch is over here, Salah is not really going to track back that much. It's not how you maximize him, especially with him aging. You have these gaps. So maybe that involves Kirkes playing more reserved. Maybe it involves having a new type of midfielder. I think Baleba is a great signing for this side. You put Baleba in this midfield and then kind of have it like Carlos Baleba. Have it like this with this double pivot and McAllister over here. You lose a runner, but you have so much more structure, I feel, in the side. And I think Baleba is like he's going to have like a top three, number 6 season, I think. When I say number 6, he's a 6, like a defensive midfielder. He's going to be one of the best in the world. And yeah, if he doesn't go this season from Brighton, he will in the next season for sure. Yeah, I think this would be really good, but obviously that's not the case. They have it like this. So yeah, the main thing that Slot's gonna have to figure out is now you're going from like a central overload and building up from the center with your wingers hugging the touchline to your fullbacks not hugging the touchline, and you building up more from a left-hand side oriented, or left. You're building up more from that left-hand side, that left-hand half space. In possession, Liverpool are going to be even more dominant. Figuring out the rest defense, I think, is the biggest issue. But yeah, I'm interested to see how they will play, and it's super exciting. I think we saw signs when they're in possession. We saw how good they can be at breaking down low blocks, how creative they can be. They have such good quality players now, so it's bound to be a success. But yeah, not really much to say right now. It's kind of like that Real Madrid thoughts video that I had, where it's like you haven't seen the squad play, you haven't seen the side play, how they're gonna play. It's only based on predictions, and so obviously I think what I do want to do is all the sides that I make these like videos on, these like initial thoughts videos on. I want to in January time, I want to make like a halfway mark sign to look back at these videos now and then see what I got wrong, what I got right, and how they have actually been playing. So yeah, let me know if y'all would be interested in that. Next videos, obviously, I'm gonna drop my Premier League predictions. I'm thinking to do, rather than like a full like just video dedicated to Premier League, because I'm not that knowledgeable on like the sides that finish under 10th. I just don't watch them like that. But I could make like a video predicting all the winners of every single league, or maybe like the top 4 in every single league, maybe like Champions League, favorites. I kind of made that video already, but maybe I can go into then who's going to be the top scorer, who's going to be the top assister, maybe some players to invest stock in, players that I think will do bad. I'll probably like make it that type of video, just another one of these like free format videos. But yeah, let me know if I missed anything. Let me know if like you guys have any thoughts on how you can see Liverpool setting up. I think if you're a Liverpool fan, you should be really excited. I think you guys are linked with two center backs as well, with Mark Gahey being one of them. I forgot the name of the second guy. But if Gahey can come in and provide a bit more depth to this back line, I think that is going to be fantastic because Konate, if he doesn't, I don't think he's going to go this season. I think next season he might go on a free. So having backup now will only be beneficial. Right now, your only natural backup at center back is Joe Gomez. Kwanzaa's gone, so yeah, having some backup there would be helpful. One thing that I think would solve a lot of Liverpool's problems, and I think this just makes it more of like a setup from last season. If you have Connor Bradley here instead of Frimpong, which I know is like you start Frimpong, he's not going to do this. But in certain games, maybe certain big games, you start Connor Bradley and you just have this type of backline because he's much more sound defensively. You can have those same. You can have that central overload. You can have that left side overload. That's the innovation. You can have Kirkes. That's a good crosser. I think he can play those diagonal balls. Wirtz can play those diagonal balls to Salah. You can have maybe him in an isolation over here. So Bosla can come over here and support Salah to help him create those isolations because then you can have those two free tens like I was talking about, and boom, Gravenberch floats in here, and Ekatika can float in this position. This is really good, I think, but you don't want to bench Frimpong because of his skill set. So it'll be interesting to see how Slut plays. But yeah, I think I'll end it there. Kind of started rambling at the end, but that's kind of how I film these videos anyway. But yeah, let me know what you think. Those two videos that I mentioned will be upcoming. I'll try to drop it before the season starts, but if anything, I'll try to make the predictions one by middle of next week. And then I still want to do Man City. It's just like they're still finalizing a lot of signings and a lot of outgoings, so it's difficult because I don't want to talk about a player that's just not going to be there, or if they include a player that it's the same case with like Chelsea. They're still very active in the transfer window. Tottenham as well. I'll start doing also when the season starts. I'm gonna start doing like match analysis, like of like big games during the week. I'll just talk about them and ramble about them. But then obviously with the tactical analysis videos that I want to film, I'll make them a bit more structured. But yeah, all right, I'll end it there. See y'all.